join in.
All right.
But thank you guys for coming to this webinar with Selwyn. I am very excited for this webinar because I am a student as well. Even though I have this company, like every time there's a webinar, I learn something new. So I really am excited for this one, especially with Selwyn, who is so, experienced and has lots of knowledge to share with
lots of gray hair.
So this is going to be a great webinar. And I love, some people come every week. Not every week, but almost every week and having a webinar. And so I'm really happy to see some of the same names coming every time, like Miranda. Shout out to Miranda and Debbie.
Shout out to Miranda and Debbie.
All the people. So where is everyone from? I always like to start out, drop where you're from so we can see where you people live in.
There's a chat thing on there, huh?
Yes.
Oh.
We've had
There's a chat.
New Orleans.
Is that where are you looking at? How do I see these folks?
There's a little button that says chat.
Enable chat, that one?
It just says chat. Oh, I don't know. It's in the same panel. So you click chat and you can see everyone. So we got people from Alabama, New Orleans, LA, the Bronx, Chicago, Brooklyn, Philly, DC, ATL.
Oh, I see London in here.
Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't believe we had someone from Australia one time, Spain, Madrid. Oh yeah, that's so.
What's up, Tony? What's up, Kimpson and Burbank? My peoples. This is fun. All right. Hey, Nadira from Brooklyn. Good. All right. Well, whenever you want to get going, wait for it to climb a little bit more.
5 minutes. Because I know my people, I love them, but they don't be on time.
You know how we do with time. Time is a particular thing. Let me see where people are from still. Jersey, Oakland, NYC, Delaware. A lot of New Yorkers.
Yeah.
I guess I am from Brooklyn. All right. All right, you guys are packed. I'm going to turn the chat off for now. And I'll let you tell me what's up, Ray.
Okay. So, yeah, I really like this new platform that I'm using. I think it's more designed for webinars as opposed to Zoom, which isn't.
Right.
I feel like a lot of people have been confused about how to register with the new platform, and that's my fault. But there's people emailing me right now saying so I'm trying to, I always say, if you guys don't have the link, that's fine, my bad, but please try to email me as soon as possible, not after it's already started, because it's hard for me to obviously be in a webinar and there's people emailing me.
Right. All right, to jump on in at that point.
Okay.
Glasses have this weird glare. Yeah, I'm just glasses. Nah, it's more, I'm on the computer so much that these things have become helpful. They're blue light, whatever you call them, blue light blockers, blue lens, whatever.
I have those too.
Because my eyes are not as young as they used to be. Right? So,
hey, even when you're young.
trying to preserve them. Many years of staring at a computer to go. So we're doing that, all right. Is my mic sound all right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the other thing about this brand new world that we're in, right? It's about figuring out what are the best headphones, what's the best microphone, what's the best camera, what's the best light. Because we live in this audio-visual connectivity now.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Alrighty.
Australia in the house. That's crazy.
Australia.
Shout out Faustina from Australia.
Yeah. Did you see the protest in Australia?
Yes, it's crazy to see people from all around the world. Like my friend lives in Canada, and he's been posting like he's out in Vancouver protesting. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that is. You like my shirt?
What's it say? Oh man, damn. Making a statement in the webinar. I love it.
Yeah, we are living statements in the skin that we are. So
I'm so happy.
So I look at it.
And I've never really seen this many white people speaking up in my life. Like, it's really weird. This happens, unfortunately, all the time, but I don't know what was the particular catalyst with George Floyd's death that seemed to really set something off. Like, my white friends who never said anything in their life about anything are all of a sudden, like energized by this. So hopefully it's not just a fad and we can make lasting change for everyone.
Yeah, and people like us have an important role in this business, right? What we do, and so we've had a lot of work to do in Hollywood for years, and hopefully some of this energy comes here, right? It works through here. But so far so good. I have been getting emails and texts all week from my non-African American friends and colleagues. So let's see where it goes. All right, so we're up at.
We can start. I mean, there's still probably people trickling in.
Yeah, I'm sure there are.
But they'll just have to be late. So let's start. I'm gonna start the presentation, and like I said, you guys can just download the presentation directly from this webinar. There's a button to the left of the chat room that says files, and the PDF is there. Just download it directly, and I am not going to be emailing this PDF out. So you just gotta download it, and yes, let's start.
All right. There's the PDF. That's my name. All right. Bye, Ray. I'll see you in a little bit. What's up, guys? I guess you're in my hands now. So, first of all, welcome. Good morning. Today we're going to talk about pitching, creating a pitch, how to pitch, a little bit about selling a pitch. First off, it's a little weird staring at my own face and the camera, but I know and trust all of you out there. Got to thank Ray for organizing this. And like we were just saying a second ago, it's a hell of a moment, right? In the country, in the world, for us individually. And I think it's an opportunity for writers, especially writers in this Hollywood space. Because what Hollywood does is, spin these shape these narratives about who we are, about who we think we are. And I think for people who look like me, not to presume, but people who look like a lot of us do, we have been needed to play more of a role and a deeper role in this kind of narrative shaping. Because, in these days and times, you're trying to figure out where's my contribution, right? Like, what do I do? How do I help shape things? And writers can have and will play, I think, a huge role in who we are as a society and a world going forward. And if part of what I can do is help some of you get there faster, even a little bit, well, that's a good way to spend a Saturday morning. All right, so what are we doing? We've got two parts to this. Part one is the instruction portion. We're going to kind of take you through everything about pitching. A lot of it will be, kind of anecdotal, because often sort of the best way to articulate something is how you do it, right? Your own best practices. And in part two, we're going to open it up for some Q&A. All right, so let's start by telling you a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know, Ray, slide, next slide. So that's me. And these are a few of the things that I have done or am doing right now. I guess from the top, Washington Black is a really cool limited series that I've been developing up at Hulu for a while. That I'm EP, I know it's a mouthful, EP, creator, showrunner, blah, 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 blah. The next one, Prince of Cats, is a feature. I work in TV and film. That's at Legendary. That's Spike Lee's directing. Then there's 1,000 Miles. That's at Big Beach Films. That Hanley Culpepper's directing. I think we also note the Twilight Zone. I was fortunate enough to spend some time in the room for season 1 of that show and wrote the episode Replay, which is now Lathan, that has a lot of relevancy today. It had relevancy back then. It's had relevancy 20 years ago, and I'm just hoping to God it doesn't have relevancy 2 years from now. If you haven't seen Replay, check it out. But the point here is that these first 3 projects were also off of pitches. Because pitching is such a huge part of what we do as writers, and it's something that you don't get, taught a lot, right? Especially when you're breaking in. It's all about, script and the page, and that's obviously like hell of important, right? But you can't succeed in this space and in this business if you don't know how to pitch, and if you don't know how to pitch at least passively well. And you don't hear that, I think, or learn that, or you're told that sort of early enough in your career as a writer, right? Because they're very different, they're different things, right? You're a writer and you're on your computer and you're used to being in your corner or whatever, and I know it's a stereotype, right? But the stereotype of the introvert writer, and pitching takes this, ability to, if not necessarily be an extrovert, but for that moment, come outside of yourself and come outside of your skin and stand in a room, whether virtually like this or a little room, and command the room and command attention and be able to convincingly say, here is what I believe and here is why you should do it, right? Those are not necessarily the same skill set, but I think that there's enough kind of continuance between them that you can learn to be a better pitcher, right? Because both of them require you to think specifically about story and character in an organized way, right? And then it's just about being able to talk about it. So let me tell you a little bit about what's worked for me. In terms of how the class will unfold, we're going to talk a little bit about what you see on the screen. First, if you're ready, we're going to talk about the pitch meeting. We're going to talk about the art of the pitch. And I'll leave you guys to go through the do's and don'ts and the resources, because those middle two, the pitch meeting and the art of the pitch, are going to take a good chunk of time. And I want to get into it, and I want to be able to get to your questions. So the rest of that stuff you can kind of read on your own, right? So let us begin with, are you ready, right? So I'm going to answer that question right off the bat. Probably not. You are probably not ready to go up in the studio or in Netflix and pitch. And I know, yes, I am generalizing, but I'm figuring that the majority of people in the class, you're still, early in your career. So let me rephrase this. The way to ask the question is, are you the person now that studio is going to hand the keys to a $100 million car to? Again, probably not, right? it's hard enough for established writers, right? It's really hard. The best analogy I can think of is it kind of feels like climbing a video game ladder, right? Defeating like boss after boss, and it keeps getting harder and harder and harder, right? First you got to find a producer, and that's the whole thing, right? How do you get with a producer? How does that relationship work? Well, let's say you do that. Then you got to go into the studio and you got to sell the thing to the studio. That's a huge, huge barrier, right? Let's say you do that. Then the network will pick it up. That's a huge, huge barrier. Then you got to go through the whole development trail. And then maybe, just maybe, if you thread all those needles, your series gets a green light. But now we're talking about, I don't know, the 99th percentile. Point being, it's really hard to do. So why would anyone do this, right? And how? But here's the thing. I think what's important here, because if you're working in Hollywood, if you want to work in this business, it takes this combination of this balance between irrational, like optimism, with the practicality, right? You got to be able to combine that thing. You need the psychological resilience to hear no 9 out of 10 times, combined with that sort of, again, outsized or irrational, like, hell yeah, I can walk up into Netflix right now and sell a series. Probably not, but you gotta believe that, right? You gotta have that thing that says, despite all the obstacles in my way, I can push through. But fine, you can't sell a show now. What should you be doing? And this is the kind of stuff that you've heard before, about working on your craft, not just writing, but also pitching. That's why we're doing this today. Building a network, meeting other writers, meeting sort of people who are in your peer group, people who are maybe a little bit ahead of your peer group, but widening your network. And just, the plug for her, Ray, our host today, does such a great job, of that. So if all of you who don't know Ray and you want to be in this business, you need to know Ray. And sort of really, really inculcate and develop all these habits that will help you get to the point where you can sell your show. But for today's purposes, all of you, everyone, we are ready to walk up in 20th century TV and sell a TV show. So let's start there at the pitch meeting, all right? Today we've got a pitch meeting. We're going to 20th, we're going to WBTV. That reminds me, I don't want to take for granted kind of where people are in sort of their context in terms of business stuff, but just so we're clear, right, it's part of what makes TV the challenge it is. So in feature film, and there's one kind of corporate entity, there's one company. Whether that's a Disney, a Universal, or a Warner Brothers, they buy your pitch, they make your movie, they distribute it. Again, you're really, really, really lucky, right? There's one person you're dealing with, one entity. In television, there's two, right? Because you first pitch to studio, again, 20th TV, Warner Brothers TV, etc. And in success, that's who you make your deal with. Not that you get paid yet. You don't get paid yet, right? Now you're with studio, then you would take it out to a network. Broadcast, cable, streamer. The network is the distribution entity. And once that's all done, then you get paid to write your pilots. We won't go into the series order part of it. So today we're on the first step. We are pitching to the studio, right? We're in this room. Who's in the room? Scott, you and your producers, you're on one side of the table. You got the studio execs over there on the other side of the table. You got these butterflies in your stomach because it is time to do this, right? Time to sell your show. Let's take a step out. And I'm going to go into anecdotal territory. That's fun territory. And I'm telling you a little bit about how this worked on my current show, the show I have at Hulu, Washington Black. So consider this a snapshot of the life cycle of taking a show out to pitch. It started with a book. Yes, you sell and do original stuff in Hollywood, of course you do, but a lot. I don't know what the ratio is, but I know, almost, maybe 75%, if not more, of my work now is adaptation. And that is, novels, comic books, magazine articles, IP, and the magic word that I'm sure you've all heard, right? So this started with a book. My producers, great producers up at the Gotham Group, found a book, fell in love with it, really, really wanted it. The next call they made was to Sterling K. Brown, who had just sort of got his production company at 20th sort of, off, but, they wanted to sort of, get him in the fold. It felt like the right kind of project, felt like it was a good, partnership. Great, Sterling's on board. Then the next call was to Anthony Hemingway. Anthony Hemingway is an awesome director. A lot of projects these days. This is sort of the packaging part of it, right? I don't mean in the literal sort of money sense that's the big brouhaha right on Hollywood. I simply mean surrounding a project with talent, right? That you're going to be able to take to the studio and say, here are the people creatively who are going to make this thing, right? So Anthony is a director, EP. He loved it. He fell on board. Then they had to chase after me because I was busy writing something else. Writers can be, it can take a while because, when you're in something, you're in something for months, right? You're like, I can't read this other thing right now. I got to keep writing. But these producers who are also my management company, they're awesome. They're amazing. And the CEO there, Ellen, just kept calling me. It's like, you have to read this book. So I finally put the script and writing aside. I read the book and I fell absolutely in love with it. It's an amazing book. So I said, okay, I'm in. So now they've got the writer. So now it's the whole package is this together, right? Next step there is we go to Sterling's studio, right? The studio that we're going to use on this is 20th, where his deal is. And I go up there and I pitch a take to the studio. There's a fun thing about Hollywood. There are all these terms that sometimes mean the same thing, sometimes don't. What is an outline versus a treatment? Are they the same thing? What is a pitch versus a take? Are they the same thing? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. I'll tell you, at least again from my POV, what a take always is your vision for how you want to execute and do a show, right? At its core DNA. What a take sometimes is think of it as the younger brother or sister to a pitch, right? So the pitch is sort of the grown-up, full-fledged thing. The take has all the same DNA. It's just a little smaller. It's just a little shorter. It's just a little, a little more surface. So early in the process, at least for me, I find myself, giving people takes before I've developed the full pitch. So we go to the studio, because they're super into it. They want to, potentially get this book and launch this project because Sterling is, one of their sort of new producer signees there. They hear the take. They love it. Okay, great. They're in the game. Now, it's a hot book. It's a popular book. So lots of people are chasing it, right? There are lots of different entities, different studios, different people who want to make this. So sometimes you find yourself in that kind of creative race. So we got on a phone call, all of us, our team, with the writer, because it's the book author who makes this decision, who he or she wants to work with. And, and then this is a fraud thing, right? Because you're basically telling someone, okay, here's how I plan to take your baby from you that you've raised lovingly from birth. Let's say they're about to go to, kindergarten, right? Here's how I'm going to now, thank you very much. And, here are the clothes I'm going to put on her and the way I'm going to feed her. Here's how we're going to grow her up. Here's how she's going to evolve. And, it can be challenging. I've had to go really, really right and really not so right. But we're not going to talk about the not so right part today. But we pitched the writer our take. She loved it. So we were in business. We won that particular first set of sweepstakes. So not a book is ours, right? So 20th buys the IP, basically. Our team is there. Then it's my job now to, okay, let me take this take that I've been pitching so far and not evolve it into a fully fleshed out, a fully formed pitch that we can then take out to networks that will allow us to go sell the damn thing. All right. So now, go back in the studio, run through, the full pitch. Okay, it's there. Everybody agrees. And now we're setting our pitch dates for the networks. And in our case, we basically pitched, so 20th is one of the studios over at Disney. They've got several television studios there. I got 20th. They got ABC, obviously. But all these sort of, studio entities there. So we were going to pitch to networks within the Disney ecosystem, which for us, for the kind of show we had, meant FX, Fox, and Hulu. And we pitched all of them on one day. I do not advise anyone to do that. It sounds as crazy and nuts as you can imagine. And it was awesome. So there's this phrase that you'll hear here, if you're really lucky, when they talk about people buying a pitch in a room, right? As I said, 9 out of 10 times they pass, right? And usually it's some version of, great, that was wonderful, we'll call you, right? Probably going to pass. The very, very rare species is when you're finished a pitch and everyone is excited, and the student and the network exec says, we want it, right? We want to buy that. We want to have that on our ear. We love this thing. We want it. And that happened for us, 3 meetings in a row when we took Washington Black out to pitch. And it's a big room. Like we're still talking about sort of what's going on in this room, trying to give you the texture of it. So let's see. It was me, my assistant, 3 producers from Gotham. It's 5. Sterling, his partner, 7. Anthony Hemingway, that's 8. So 8 people on our side, what they call the show, right? So we're the show, right? Then you got the studio. In our case, in 20th, you've got 3 execs from the studio. That's 11 people. Then you've got the network, and that may vary. At the very least, you usually get 2 people. You'll get the actual exec you're pitching, and you'll get the very junior person who is taking notes. But usually it can move. In our case, it tended to be anywhere from 3, sometimes 5 people. So there's a hell of people in this room, right? It's like 16 people, sometimes in this room. So it's a party. But personally, I love to pitch to a lot of people. And hopefully when we get through all of this, so will you, and you'll understand why. Because more people, emotion tends to travel, and everybody wants to sort of feel what the common energy is. And you can sort of get that when you're pitching to a lot of people. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the composition of a pitch, right? And the art of a pitch, because we're in this meeting, right? We got all these people around. So what the hell are we doing, right? And how do we do it? So this is the real school part of it. Okay. So what is a pitch, right? I guess in its simplest articulation, it is the verbal presentation of your show. It is the articulation of your vision, right? It's you telling them, it's you telling me the story of how you're going to execute and bring the show to life. Let me say now that, look, like everything that writers do in Hollywood, people do it differently. None of us do things exactly the same. But there's usually sort of a core of good practices. When it comes to pitching, some people, write, very, very, very heavy blocks of prose, like it's a reading document, and, they essentially will go in there and they'll read it, right? I tend to write a document that's composed of bullet points that sort of, remind me, much like a presentation, much like a doc, that sort of give me a train track of where we are, but allows me room to talk extemporaneously and to ad-lib. Some people go in there with cue cards. There's even a couple people I know who memorize the thing. You don't have to do that, right? But there's a couple of people I know who memorize it and go in there and it's like a memorized speech, right? It's in the end, it's whatever best works for you to be able to articulate and present your show, right? So this is not about taking what I'm going to tell you as hard rules, but again, it's the practices that have worked for me, and find and put your own spin on it, right? So let me walk you through how I just put together a pitch in the first place, right? How this thing kind of comes together. So I want to create a show. All right. How, right? Where do you start? This is such a Herculean task. So you got to boil it down, to this simple idea. What's the door to this thing, right? What is the entry point? How do you get into this world of the show that you want to do? And for me, it tends to be one of three common entry points. It can be thematic, it can be character driven, character emotional driven, or it can be story and or plot based, right? And this is true whether you're adapting or you're doing an original. These are sort of the three buckets that you got to keep in mind. That for me, I think for most of us, we'd say like it's the real DNA of dramatic, storytelling. So once you sort of figured out where your particular, what interests you, about a project. Was it a plot element that sort of, got you excited? Is there something particular about this character and her journey and the emotion and the conflict there, that really warms your heart? Or is it thematic? Is it in whatever the sort of larger ideas or notions that the show wants to explore? Like, one of these things is going to sort of bite you and excite you, and if they don't do it, right? Like honestly, like, here's the thing: you'll compromise this a little bit early in your career, but don't mess with anything that you don't love, right? That doesn't make you kind of burn inside, like, as a writer, that insists that it has to get out of you. What we do is hard, right? And it's miserable to do it if you're doing it from the context of, man, let me just do this so I can get this check, right? Like, you gotta love the thing because it's hard enough, right? So when you have found the way in, you have found the door that's compelling, now you're ready to sort of write some stuff, right? And I tend to begin with just a graph, that grows to half a page, that maybe grows to to a page, and it's still me sort of finding a way to articulate the show, right? It's about this woman, this particular character who is on this particular emotional journey, who is experiencing this conflict. That's all the character stuff, right? But all these, like, character things then have to be articulated through this story. Here's the actual plot of the thing that's happening. That's all the plot. That's the story stuff, right? They blew up the thing. They're doing a heist, whatever. She's trying to rescue her kidnapped kid. That's all plot. That's all story. And then that character stuff and that plot stuff then all have to come together and make sense thematically, right? And simpler to think about thematically is just to answer yourself some questions like, what does this mean? Why am I doing this? What does it have to say about me, the individual artist? What does it have to say about the larger state of the world, right? So those are all the sort of buckets. And again, different folks do it, do it differently, but that consistently will give you the meat of your idea, and now you're ready to sort of go into the actual buckets of your pitch and start filling them out with more detail, right? Because your entry point, you've got maybe a page or so, maybe two, maybe it's prose, it's bullet points, but you've got some stuff, right? You've got the architecture of your idea. Now we're ready to get deeper. Okay, Ray, you can flip the slide now. Okay. So we're going to talk about these, I call them silos. Sometimes I call them buckets. Terminology, right? You call it what you want. It's understanding what the purpose of it for. But think of a pitch, right? As a Lego structure, right? Built up of these, buckets that are attached together. And when you go through all of them, when you turn them all out on the table and they spill on the table, that's your show, right? And always note, different people do it differently. You may even find yourself articulating slightly different buckets on a different show that you're pitching, right? Everything doesn't demand the same. But what I'm trying to give you here, I think, are at least those core things that will have some commonality, no matter what the show is that you're pitching. So what's the first one? The first one is kind of cool because it'll dovetail off what you just did, and this is the series overview, right? On the on your actual pitch document that you're working out, whatever this ends up being for you. My pitch documents usually run, God, again, depends on the show, anywhere from 8 to 12, 13 pages of these different sections and these bullet points, right, that I do. But this first section is the overview, right? So what's the overview? The overview is again, that a lot of that thinking and language that you did just before this, right? It's that first paragraph at its most macro level that says, why are we here, right? Why this show? What is it about? Why are we doing it now? Actually get used to these questions because execs love these questions, and sometimes they can be so goddamn annoying. If another TV exec says, well, why now? Well, why now? Well, why now? It won't be enough. You're going to hear that all the time. So prepare yourself here. Hit them right from the top. This is why we are doing this show. It's about this. It's about this moment, and it's about this character, and it's this journey, and here's how the story stuff evolves, and here's why we give a shit right now. Here's why it matters. Here's why it's universal. Here's why it's relatable. All that language that feels like it's a little kind of silly, right? It's not silly like sell in, but kind of marketable, right? It's you selling your show. Like, here's where you do it, right at the top. Why are we here today? Why am I not wasting your time? Why are you in this meeting? Well, let me tell you. Here's what I got for you, right? So that is the overview. We'll give you that sort of rough sense. That's bucket one. Okay. Next one. Okay, great. I like that. That sounds good. Why are you the person, right? And you can really kind of screw your pitch up here. But I think this is where you can sell it, right? You can really, really make the point. Because here is where something moves from being potentially generic to special and unique and particular to you. I think especially people who look like us, right? Again, I'm presuming. I don't know who's who out there, but I'm going to say us, right? Look like this. We're in this skin. Like for me, there's this narrative, and it's not a narrative, it's true, right? About the challenges and the difficulties that we can face as Black folk, out here. But there's a way to look at it. And I've looked at it this way, my whole life. Yes, being Black makes me distinct, it makes me different in a landscape that is usually not that, right? But for me, I look at it as this is my superpower, right? Like this is my this right here, all of this is my Batman's cape, right? My Superman's outfit. This is what gives me my unique POV on the world, right? And if there is one thing television is about, it is that kind of deep level specificity, right? Like, why are you the person to tell this story? What is unique about your experiences, your background, the way you see the world, right? If I told 10 of you, come up with a pitch for a vampire show, right? I hope each one of them feels really, really specific that just because it's a vampire show, Johnny can't do Jane's vampire show because the specificity of it is baked into who they are as a writer. Does that make sense, right? So this section right here is where you are really, really able to sell the point that the show cannot succeed without you. You are the person to tell the show because there is no show without your unique and special voice. And that's where you make that case. Next section. You can call it the world. You can call it the setting, right? This is especially true of genre shows, right? I've talked about a vampire show before, right? So genre shows have, they've got rules and they've got mythologies, Johnny's vampires come out in the day and sparkle like diamonds, right? But, Jerry's vampires look like feral half-demon bats and only come out at night, right? Whatever the mythology and the rules of your world are, how does your world work? But what's important is that this isn't just about genre show, again, right? I want you to keep thinking about this word like specificity, like throughout this entire pitch, right? Again, think about how specificity applies here, right? Think about the specificity of an Insecure versus 20s, right? Like both shows with folk who look like us set in Los Angeles, but completely different, right? And in your pitch as you articulating, what the show is, what this vision is, you've got to be able, again, to talk about the world that it's set in, talk about the setting of the show, talk about the mythology, if it exists or not, but to really have your listeners come out of this section having felt like, oh, wow, okay, they just sort of like ducked my head like through this window and I saw this whole world kind of come to life, right? So that's your job here. All right. Then we move to tone and structure. This is one of those boxes that might shift around in terms of where it's located in your pitch. I like to put it here. The amount of weight or content that's in it might vary pitch to pitch depending on the particularities of your show. For me, you may not always have like sort of big structural stuff to pitch necessarily. I'm a big believer in if you don't have a thing, then don't present a thing, right? Like stay clean, like less is more. But you can always, I think, make some good representations in terms of tone, right? In terms of really, I know we talked about the world giving you like a sense of what your show feels like. So in essence, talking about the tone sort of takes that same conversation and sort of furthers it, right? What does your show feel and sound like? And can you make that relatable to the listener through comps, right? Another Hollywood word. You should ring bells whenever there's like a Hollywood jargon word, right? Comps, right? What's a comp, right? What other show can you compare it to? Comp, right? Now, hopefully we're not saying that your show is exactly like this other thing. Well, yeah, it's just like ABCD, because then there's no freaking reason for your show to exist, right? But it's more about, can you take some of the particular aspects of your show and be able to tell me, well, this aspect of my show kind of feels like this, and make me go, oh, okay, because I know that show and I can see it, I can get it. Does your show have the, I don't know, emotional texture and kind of, friend relationship intimacy of an Insecure, right? Does it have something that's akin to the family dynamics of This Is Us, or even, and this is like a structural thing, the sort of non-linear structure of This Is Us, right? Does it have, for instance, think of season 1 of True Detective and what the director Cary Fukunaga did in terms of making place, right? That Southern Gothic setting feel like a character, right? Like that's something that execs like to hear, right? Does it have a kind of visual language that makes the place feel alive, makes it feel like a character, like True Detective or a number of other things you can cite, right? So you do like 3 or 4 of those, and now you're beginning to, the whole job as you're going through this pitch is you're just putting more and more building blocks and texture of your vision. You're bringing your vision of the show to life, right? And this is an important step right before you go into what will either sell or not sell your show. Our next section, which is the characters, okay? Ray, switch slides. Okay. So, like it says, this is where you're gonna make your bread, right? Look, I'm not saying that you can mess up all the other sections and get this one right, because if you mess up all the other sections, this probably isn't right anyway. But this is really why they bought the ticket of admission to come and sit down in your pitch, right? Because this is what television is based on. Yes, features are, make all the right sounding noises about the importance of character and so on and so forth. And don't get me wrong, as a feature writer, it is, right? But there's a huge difference in terms of TV. You've got much less reliance on spectacle, right? You've got much less reliance on sort of the sort of plot-heavy kinetics. I mean, look, all those shows like that can exist, but those tend not to be good shows. But where TV really makes its bread and butter is in this long-term investment in human beings, right? In characters. So what do we do? So what are we doing here in this in this character section? First of all, I'll tell you what it's not. What it shouldn't be. It should not be a laundry list of everybody saying your freaking show. Like, don't do that. Right? All I want to hear about, because of the depth that you have to go into here, are your leads, right? Or your leads or lead and maybe the one or two other people that have a significant impact on the journey of your lead, right? Maybe that's the main villain, the bad girl or guy, or however. But at the end of the day, we probably don't want to be going through, anywhere more than say 3 people, right, in this section, because we gotta get into it. We got to get under the skin, right? Another thing that this is not, these are not biographies, right? I think somewhere, in some old bad screenwriting book or how to do this, there's something like that, because I tend to see people, again, who are at an early stage, thinking about how to do their characters in a way that makes me feel like, okay, I'm hearing about someone's biography. Yeah, and she was born in Compton, and then this, and then her parents got divorced, and da 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 da. What I'm hearing are all these, what I like to make up my own words, to externalities, right? Like, these are all external things, right? So your task here is really to, okay, great, take an externality, right? But take it under the skin of the character. Like, what does it mean? Okay, she was born in Compton, right? So what, right? Like, it's not just enough to assume, okay, well, I think you're telling me that this person was born in a kind of particular socioeconomic bracket or whatever, right? What does being born in that location mean? If it doesn't mean something, don't include it. And if it does, include it, right? In terms of how it impacts the character under the skin, right? Her parents got divorced when she was 5. Well, okay. Well, don't assume that comes loaded with some emotional significance for the character that I understand, like, intuitively. Okay, tell me how that means, or what that means. Tell me if that is the, kind of seismic emotional event, right, that knocks over like the domino inside this character and sets them on a trajectory at 9 that ends up here when they're 20. That's all because of this domino that fell over like 20 years ago, right? Like, talk about your character in those sort of deeply internal, that deep internal way. Talk about people that are not complicated but are complex, right? Don't create people who feel whole, right? Who feel complete. It sounds counterintuitive. It sounds, well, of course you wouldn't, but you'd be surprised at how many people do. At how simple a step this is to make. Right? Like, television is about a journey. Television is about a character agitating, pushing, consciously or unconsciously, against the bars of their own psychological prison, right? Like, we all put ourselves in a cage of some kind or the other, and we are sitting back to see, is this mofo going to get out this cage or not, right? Sometimes the or not is the more interesting journey, but either way, they are flawed people. They are people who are agitating, and it's that sort of, agitating both for yourself, and then you have 2 characters who are now agitating against each other. That's conflict, like, that's drama, right? So it is this kind of stuff, that allows you to really sort of build your characters up, from the ground. Flawed people trying to figure themselves out, trying to figure their shit out, right? That's dramatic storytelling. One other little helpful thing that I'll drop here, because this came up, I guess, in the last thing I did for Ray, and people kind of liked it. They never heard it before, so I'll say it again. People always ask about dialogue, right? Oh, how do I get my characters to sound differently? And I don't want them all to sound the same. They all sound the same. And the answer that I gave then, this is where it starts, in this kind of thinking in terms of how you construct the character, how you construct these flawed people who are agitating. Because if you have done this right, what is going to happen when you get to the point, because this is way before you're writing any dialogue, but if you've done all this building of your house correctly, you get to the point where you're writing dialogue, you don't have to worry about people sounding differently, because they're going to be thinking differently, right? Like, it is impossible for me to sound like Ray because Ray and I are not the same person, right? Like, different experience, different conflicts, different struggles. Even if some of those things, if we were in a TV show, may feel like they overlap. So if you've done this part of your homework right, you're never going to be in that place where you're like, oh man, how do I? Okay, maybe this guy always says nah, and this girl always like drops her G's. Like, don't do that surface stuff, right? Do the hard work here, build these people, and they will become people. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, how can I get them sound differently, right? So that's just another way to help you kind of think about your character. All right, so let's move on from characters. Again, quick again to say, super important. Don't do more than 3 in there. Yes, your show has other characters, but those people you can pop up in this next section that we're going to talk about now in an organic way. Now we're going to talk about the story, right? So we've kind of given you like an overview, right? We have talked about why you're the writer to do this, why it matters in a specific way. We've talked about the world of our show, set on Mars, well, whatever, right? But in a specific, unique way. We've talked about the characters, and we've had them just hanging off our word level because we're talking about people, right? You want to make your listeners kind of feel for the journeys of these characters. Okay, great. Now that's all this stuff. Now we got to talk about, well, what is the journey, right? In other words, the story, right? That we are pushing all of this stuff through. Like, all this stuff is this, is this ill mix, this ill drink that we've made it up, right? And now we're gonna pour it down some pipes, right? And that piping, as it twists and turns and doubles back, like that's your story, that's your story. That is the architecture through which everything else moves. Okay, so I want to talk about story from three angles, right? In terms of your pitch, right? First, what's giving you momentum? What's pushing you through the story, right? Second, the pilot, and specifically how those things that are pushing your story ignite, come to life in the pilot. And then third and last, how your season then flows out and evolves from the pilot. So in your pitch, you're going to be covering talking about story from, these 3 angles. All right. So to begin, that first thing, like, what's pushing our story? What's happening in the context of the world of the show? Right? How are things kind of weaving in and out of each other? Right? Like, this kind of stuff is the heart of serialized, storytelling. What is driving us? Right? Where are we getting our dramatic momentum from? Like a lot of things, sometimes it's helpful to look at other shows, right? It sort of brings the academic language to like, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. So one of my favorite shows in general, but both for this kind of purpose, is Game of Thrones. All right. So I want to talk about just for a second how this notion of the different things that ignite story momentum works in a show like Game of Thrones, right? So take Game of Thrones, and let me define what I'm talking about, right? I'm not necessarily talking about, if you've read enough books, right, and you've done that stuff, right, you're like, well, he's talking about A story and B story and then C story, sort of, right, but not from an ep perspective, more in a kind of high macro seasonal perspective, right? Because every episode of Game of Thrones is going to have tons of stories, right? It's A story, it's B story, it's C story, and how those things track, right? But at the most kind of macro level, right? Again, where drama works and at least where drama works in the context of you selling a show, right? That number tends to get reduced to a core set of forces that are driving the story. And if you were to look at a show like Game of Thrones, you would probably find 3, right? 3 kind of main north winds, right? Main things kind of pushing the energy of the show, right? The first one would be, very simply enough, all of the individual human character stories, right? Just at its simplest level. What's going to happen to Arya? Oh my God, they killed Jon, right? Like all of the just human stuff, right? That has human agency, that has that, kind of ground level, like intimacy, right? That's one, right? Second step up is kind of right there in the title of the show, right? It's the actual Game of Thrones, right? It is the battle for the Iron Throne, right? It is all of the, again, in the dramatic sense, all of the larger machinations, Machiavellianness about power, right? Who has it? Who doesn't have it? The wars, the conflict, yada yada yada. But it's all about a struggle. The show is about not just, as again, we've done the human part, but the second level is about the struggle for power, right, and who wields it. Third, and this will be true for a lot of genre shows, but in GOT, this third level now in terms of like driving story, it's the White Walkers, right? And what are the White Walkers? The White Walkers are the genre element. The White Walkers are the existential threat, right? The White Walkers are the sort of Damocles that's hanging over the whole enterprise that, oh my God, it's going to fall and cut everybody's heads off, like, at some point, right? So it is, again, now in the, like, that now gives you, like, energy, right? Because you're able to be like, okay, now people's individual stories will cross each other and cross through, yes, all three of those. You could locate Arya's journey in any one of those three things at different points along the show, right? But this is what gives you as a writer and as a creator, like, dramatic tools to work with, like organizational tools to work with, ways to think about and organize your story. Your story may not have three, maybe it's got two, maybe it's got four, but the key is to be able to, in that pitch, to organize, understand where your dramatic momentum is coming from and be able to articulate that in the meeting. All right. Number two, talk about the pilot. Think about the pilot a couple different ways. Think about it as a structure that has a beginning, middle, and end. All right. Like, when in doubt, always go back to Aristotle. Right. Things start, things down the middle, things down the end. Right. Think about the pilot as not something that you are pitching beat by beat, right? You're not beating this out. Less is more, y'all. Like, for real. Like, you got to give enough, right? But don't get too bogged down in the details, right? So, what's important? Caveat: this can change depending on the nature of the show, right? But generally speaking, for me, here's the pilot part of the story part of my pitch. I want to pitch a compelling opening scene, right? An exciting teaser, if you will. And again, just to step up, this level, nothing that I'm doing in the pitch, especially here where I'm talking about story, ever gets far away from. Remember when we started way back when, and we were like, theme, character journey, story journey, right? Those things, however they are articulated, whatever they are in my show, are going to come up consistently throughout my pitch. So even when I'm pitching, I'm down and I'm pitching this opening scene, and I don't know, whatever, it's a guy coming in and tries to kill somebody, and whatever, it's a kinetic kind of action thing. As I'm pitching it, like, I'm always going to make sure that I'm also articulating kind of what it means from a character level and what it means from a thematical level, and in addition to the plot story stuff. So you never want to get too far away from that. But pitch your opener, right? Then you pull back a little bit. You want to give us a little bit of a general overview of where you want to pilot, kind of where we're going. We want to meet our characters. We kind of want to understand what the status quo of this world is, right? And we want to understand what the event is that changes that status quo. Maybe it was the thing in a teaser, that you pitched. That's usually the cleanest version. Maybe not, right? Then we want to sort of get on our arc of the journey sort of within the context of the pilot, right? We're pitching up here in this, general kind of macro language, and occasionally you want to dip down and give a little more, detail, specifically get into, a scene. Again, don't do a ton of scenes, a scene at the top of the teaser, maybe there are two scenes along the way. If your scenes are really illustrative of some of these larger things that we've been talking about, illustrative of theme, illustrative of the character journey, illustrative of how these main forces that are pushing, your drama are igniting, are coming to life in your pilot. So it's all of this kind of language. And if you do enough of that, we get to the end. And that's the next place where I always say, yes, pitch in more detail here. It's the end of your pilot. You want to pitch that key scene that's going to take us, out of it. Maybe it's a cliffhanger. But either way, you want that last beat of your pilot to feel kinetic, right? To not just feel as if you're pitching it from a story plot perspective, bang, and then we cut to black and, whatever, right? It's not just like a story plot perspective, but it's also, again, from a character perspective. Like, you want to come out of this sort of pilot section with us as the listeners, having a clear sense of, what has been the emotional arc of our leads, right? The people that we're invested in, how have they changed or not, by the end of the pilot, and how are they set up for us as we're going into episode 2, right? So these are the questions and some of the things that matter in the pilot section. Then you go into the rest of the season. Now we're talking about, episodes 2 through 10, or however you're imagining your first season is constructed. I might have mentioned it before, but both during the pilot and during this section of pitches, where you can mention your supporting characters. Doing supporting characters within the body of story I found is really a great way to help to fill out the story stuff, because, truth be told, you usually have like some great kind of macro ideas, and you got a couple of specific things, but it's really going to take you getting into the bones of this, usually with a writer's room, right, to sort of truly do justice to the story plot stuff, the way it should be. So pitching your story sort of in the context of the people that your lead smashes into, runs into, agitates against, has conflict with throughout the arc of that journey, and how they push and pull and shape that arc, kind of gives you a way to talk about the shape of your season without necessarily getting too mired down in plotty details, right? Tell it through people. Tell it through the skin of the people, right? By F3, by F4, Johnny's encountered Mr. Black, and this is who, and then you're gonna spend like 5 minutes, like, tell us about Mr. Black, and like what makes him tick, and in the same context, the same way you talked about, about the characters in the character section, but here for the supporting stuff, it's both, yes, who they are organically on their own people, but again, more so how they, they're like pool balls, right, that are knocking up against, the journey of your main character. So that's kind of what we understand. And then we get to the end of, we understand how that's traced through for the entire season. And we're almost at the end of this pitch, believe it or not. The next section, we're going to flip the slide here, is future seasons, right? This doesn't have to be especially long, right? But you need it, unless you're pitching a limited, which you shouldn't do if you're a young writer. They're not going to buy that. But it's really about giving them a sense of where we go. Where do we go from here, right? You want to be able to communicate the fact that your show has legs. You want to communicate the fact that you've thought about it. Again, bad version, well, in season 1, the vampires took over Compton. And now in season 2, they're going to take over Los Angeles. And then the Martians are going to land too, right? Well, whatever. But the point is, if you can pitch it in a way that gives us a sense that the world of your show is expanding, the emotional conflict or stew, feels like it's getting more and more complicated. Try to paint that journey out again very, very quickly in macro terms. So tell us, sum up how we came out of season 1 and where we are. Season 2, you imagine this kind of thing happening, and this is where the conflict is going to come from, and this is where that's going to grow, and then and that's going to kick us into the 3rd season, and then now we're here, and this thing is happening, and that thing is happening. So now we feel like, okay, wow, this is a journey here, that we're going on. And again, as much as you can do, in fact, do this, as much as you can do all of this just do it through the lens of character, right? I'm sounding like a broken record. Sorry, that just hit that. Um, don't think, yeah, even though I'm saying dumb stuff like, and then the Martians come, right? That's a plot thing, that's a story device. But what does the Martians coming mean, right? For some character, for your lead character, what is the internal impact of this externality, right? As long as you are staying in that mindset, you'll be straight. And then the very last section of your pitch is, and these are all my terms. This is what I call it. But I like to call this section the emotional ending, because at the end of the day, you're telling a story, and you're taking people through highs and lows, and you want to sort of bring them down for this ending, and you want to resonate emotionally, and that can be a variety of things. It might be specific to the character journey along the track of the entire show. So maybe where your lead ended up at the end of the last section where you're talking about season 3 or season 4, maybe you know where this ends, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if this is the way it happened, but if you were David Chase pitching The Sopranos years ago, and you knew and you pitched back then, which I don't think you did, but let's say you did, right? And you knew that it would end, after the war, and you're in a diner, and your lead character is tense, and we're not sure, and he's looking around, and we cut to black, and what the fuck happened, right? If you sort of know emotionally, character-wise, where your journey ends, then pitch that, right? You may not know that, so instead you might want to do something that brings it back to you as a writer and creator, that brings it back to the why now of this whole thing, to why this matters to you, to why this matters to us. But whatever you do, just think of it as this emotional bow tie that you need to kind of wrap the whole thing up and leave us feeling it in our chest. All right, so that was, now you've done all that, you've got a 8, 10, 12 page document. I'm not sure if you're seeing the stuff on screen, but this is the point at which ignore the slides, because I'm telling you a bunch of other stuff that's not on the slides. But you've got this thing, right? You've got here's your pitch, right? You got your pitch on your computer, right? You're gonna roll up into the meeting. Now, what are you doing? Now, how do you actually do it, right? So let us kind of end this out by talking about how to pitch, okay? And again, like I've been saying, these are best practices. These are my practices. I love to pitch, and I'm not too bad at it. So you will find a version of these that work for you, and think of these things as cues to, maybe help you get a head start. There are no slides that are specific to what I'm going to go through now, so just take good notes. All right. So we got this pitch we've built. That's the composition part, right? So here comes the art, and I'll just kind of take you through some sections, some terms, some things, that have worked for me. All right. First of all, guys. Here's my biggest pitch thing. How to do this thing? Relax, right? RELAX. Chill, right? The actual mental battle and stress and agitation to do a pitch for so many people is the biggest hurdle. Like, that's half your challenge right there, right? You got to think about it. Like this literally is the oldest thing known to humankind, right? Telling a story around a campfire, right? You can do that, right? You can do this, right? You can relax, smile, right? Up in that room, like you're having a good time. Tell a joke, they'll laugh. Trust me, even if it's corny as hell, right? You have this. You have been telling stories since the time you learned to talk, right? So first set thing in how to pitch, relax, underline 3 times, right? And all that other stuff I said, right? But get yourself into that frame of mind, okay? Speaking of story, number 2. I like to call it the once upon a time approach, right? Let me ask you guys, how would you read a bedtime story to your kid, right? To your nephew, to your niece. Would you read it? This is, call me writer A, right? And I'm up in the pitch meeting, and I'm like, once upon a time there was a guy, and then the dragon came out, and then this thing happened, and then that thing happened, and then this thing happened, and then that thing happened, and this thing happened, right? It's like, is that how you read a bedtime story? Right? Probably not. Right? Like, this thing is no different, right? It has rises and falls. It has ebbs and flows, right? And I know, yes, not everyone is, you might be thinking of this, like, not everyone is a natural performer, right? You may not think of yourself like that. But I bet you wouldn't read a bedtime story the way I just did, right? You probably read it something closer to, once upon a time. And then the dragon jumped out, right? Holy shit. And then the screams, and then everything got quiet, right? Yeah, I mean, you're not going to do it literally the way I did, right? But the point is, like, you know how to tell a story, right? Like, you know. So that's where the relaxation comes in, right? The reminding yourself that this is a natural thing that you're engaged in. It's not some unnatural, I don't know how they do PhD defense dissertations, but it's not that, right? It's just telling a damn story. And if you've done all that work that we talked about before, and you've prepared, and you've got the thing in front of you, you just got to take people through it. You just got to talk through it, okay? Let's get a little more kind of detail. We're going to talk about the rhythm between what I call the micro and the macro. You've probably heard me using those terms along the way today. But storytelling, I think, in a pitch kind of moves between those two states, right? The micro is down here. It's down here in a story beat and in a character moment. You want people to feel it, right? Like, it's the texture, it's the kinetic, it's the ooh, right? It's the emotion, right? That you can taste, that you can smell. Like, that's micro. That's like in the scene. That's like in the character's head, right? But then you gotta be able to pull back up to the macro, right? Because as you're going through a pitch, right, you can't pitch your whole pitch down here within the micro. Like, I don't know, maybe you can. I can't, right? It's got to be this sort of thing between the two. And the macro is up here. The macro is being able to kind of put those details in context so your listeners don't lose the big picture, so they can follow. And again, you're always doing this in the context of, the thematic journey, their character journey, the story plot journey, where we are, in the pitch, this particular place, what it means, right? 2 words that I would suggest, damn near tattooing on your writer's forearm, right? Clarity and coherence, right? Clarity and coherence. You always want people to have a sense of where you are, right? So this sort of thing between micro and macro, think of it as kind of swimming on the water, and then you gotta like pop up and just kind of relocate where, kind of where you are. You're doing that for the listener. You're doing that for the people who are in this room as you are pitching, right? And that is it is that movement between states that gives good pitches a natural sense of rhythm and a natural sense of pacing. And again, storytelling, right? Because storytelling is not one state, it's several, but it's at least those two, right? Micro and micro. Next thing I'll tell you a little bit about is reading and manipulating the room, right? Because you're in a room, whether it's a virtual room, which is a new thing for a lot of us. I've been pitching virtually. We're still talking about the good old school conference table. We're in a room, right? And I guess the underscore of this is flexibility. That's the watchword that reading and manipulating a room is about, right? And here's why. People can be really weird in pitches. Okay, your listeners. I've had some experiences. I've had people. I've been in a pitch where there was damn near a fight going on in the office next door, and this sounded that way, and there was yelling and loud screaming, but yet the executive really wasn't trying to be like, let me go deal with that, or I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm gonna keep pitching. I have pitched to an exec who doodled the entire time. Like, I didn't know at the time that this is how he processed information. But literally, I'm pitching the homie, and he's got a pad in front of him, and he's like, drawing the whole time, right in front of me, right? And it could be so disconcerting. I have pitched to a studio, a production head who used to be a lawyer and just took a creative job and really wanted to prove that he was creative. So I kid you not, every other line of my pitch, he would jump in, right? And he would jump in like, I'd be like, yes, and then da 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 da. He'd be like, oh, wait, okay, yeah, I know where this is going, and then this happens, and then this happens, right? And then that, and I'm just like, dude, let me get through it, right? But you gotta maintain your cool, right? You have to be able to respond and continue on, no matter what is happening in front of you, right? The most common thing that you'll get, like all of those are extremes of a different sort, and you may find those, but the one thing that I will guarantee that you will get is the classic exec poker face, right? You will be pitching to somebody, and you are pouring your heart out, and you're going into it, and they will be like, and that's hard. That's challenging, right? But you can't get thrown off, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with these room distractions, right? How do you, read it and then manipulate it to your purposes? So here's some things that help. The first and probably the most useful thing is the team that you're in there with, right? Is your producers, right? I described Washington Black. There was like damn near a basketball team, of us. Usually it's not that many. The two features that I talked about earlier that I sold is both with a company that I work with a lot, great producers, family of mine, Zucker Productions, and it's usually just myself and Jan and Katie, so it's three of us in the room. And when that happens, I'm encountering a weird thing that might throw me off. You look at your producer who's here, right? Like you also gotta be strategic in kind of where you sit, right? I tend to sit in a place that allows me to have, a producer, a team member in eye line here, and a team member in eye line here. Like sometimes directly, side to side, but if that's the case, I want to be able to move my chair so I can see them, because when you feel like, man, I'm not getting none of this dude, right? You want to be able to turn to your producer because they know the pitch, right? They know what the emotional parts are. They know where to laugh at, and sometimes just that quick eye to eye, just reassurance, just gets you enough back on your game. You can't stop addressing the execs that that you're talking to, but being able to fall back into the familiarity of your team is a really useful tool. So producers, eye contact is huge. I am a big fan of eye contact in a room. I can be like pretty aggressive with the eye contact, right? So it's like I got three execs on the other side, right? Like I want to know like who's on my side, right? Because usually you don't get like both people doing like that. That oftentimes might be the most senior person. You can almost always depend on like the junior exec who's happy to be here to be the person that's like laughing and and kind of being react. So you want to get into like you want to be able to read them and be able to suss out who's your ally. Not like anyone's your enemy, like ostensibly, right? But who is giving it back to you? Like you're giving, who is receiving and giving it back to you emotionally, right? And you want to lock in on that person. Like I've done stuff where like somebody gets hyped up and I'm giving them dap across the table, right? Like now they feel like they're all like we're all part of this, right? And the more you make people feel like they are with you, on this journey, on this trip, right? You're kind of laying the groundwork for, yeah, let's just stay on this journey and do this project, as we go forward. What's the eye contact that's going to tell you that? If you are kind of stuck in your pitch like this, you're not going to see that, right? You're going to miss the reactions. You're going to miss your potential ally, right? You want to get that. Okay, great. But Selwyn, what if they're all stone faced, right? Everybody's frozen, or everybody's the whole vibe is whatever. Sometimes, a lot of times, actually, I do this whether they're frozen or not. I like to shake the room up, right? So let's just say shake them up, right? So how do you shake them up? So I'm just thinking of pitches in the past. So there's a couple things that I used technique wise. I'm a big fan of what I call the sudden clap, right? Clap. So you're pitching, and it's usually kind of if you're like in a scene and things are tense, and then all of a sudden I'll just be like, and da 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 da, bam, right? And they'll all jump, right? Or the alternative to the clap is the pound of the table, right? So same thing, you're pitching, and I'll be like, bam, I hit the table, right? Or it's a fight scene, I'll, kind of, just do something physical that makes noise, right? I mean, I've had like people like jump in front of me, jump out their skin. But you're shaking them up, right? Because they're in that room too with expectations, with whatever, with their own, we've all got our sort of like expectation, conformity, these roles that we're in. Sometimes you got to shake people out of it, like. Yeah, I do that, but sometimes it's the laugh, it's the connection, it's the dap over that table. Like a lot, I, if you guys can't tell by now, tend to talk extemporaneously a lot, meaning I ad-lib like a motherfucker, right? So I will tend to stop pitches like dead in their tracks if something feels like it's contextual to someone I'm in, and I'll make the effort to pull a listener into what I'm doing, right? To stop and ask an exec a question, right? To make an observation of an exec, to get them to speak, right? To get them to come to forget for a moment sort of the skin that they're in as they come into the room, and now be a part of my party, be a part of my game. So yes, it's a lot of psychological games here. So that's shaking them up. That's shaking the rhythm up. Then probably the last thing, and there's probably more of these little things that I'm forgetting right now. I'm trying to give you guys what I think are the main things. Then the last one I would say is, and that last example I gave about talking to an exec kind of fits in here, but it's about spotting, the unexpected cool thing, right? Or the unexpected moment and being able to seize on it. And look, this is not a have to, because again, we all don't pitch the same way, right? I have friends who pitch very successfully, who pitch, a lot more rigidly than I do. Yes, I'm a loose pitcher, and I think that's my particular strength, right? Some people are like, nope, I gotta stay on my thing, and if I get thrown off, it's all messed up. You're not gonna throw me off, because as far as I'm doing, like, we're just around a fire, man. I'm telling you a story, right? And you feel me, right? So it works. But I like to take these like unexpected cool moments, right, that can just throw the room off. And a really funny example, a cool one, is actually for Washed in Black. And so we're pitching, and I've got Sterling K. Brown in the room, right? Amazing actor. And there's a part in the pitch where our lead character, who has been pursued and hunted, by this white man who in some ways has metastasized to something that's more than human, right? Almost a demon, right? In some ways. And he finally, as an 18-year-old, is having sort of the confrontation scene that he's been thinking about and dreading forever, right? And it's a fight, right? It's a pretty violent fight. And I love to pitch fights, right? No surprise, right? And I'm doing the fight, right? And I think the moment where I said, our character, Wash, stabs him, right? And Sterling's on the other side of the table, right? So I go and he stabs him, right? And Sterling goes, mm. And originally I just meant to just keep on, right? Keep going. But I'm like, okay, I like that, right? I was like, he stabs him again, right? Sterling goes, right? I'm like, he stabs that motherfucker again. Sterling goes, stab that cracker, right? And he and I both like get up, right? He's on one and I'm on the other end, and we're literally like doing this whole call and response thing as I'm pitching this fight scene. And look, this is not to say like make sure you have an Emmy-winning actor in your pitch who can do that, right? It's not even to say like you should have the ability to necessarily do that, but it's about if you can get to a place where you're loose, where you're flexible with your material, where you can see opportunities organically as they arise, it'll put you, I think, in good stead. Okay. Next component of how to pitch. Let's talk about media assets, right? And I mean visuals, decks, and music. Again, this for me is really about what works for you and what works for the show that you're pitching. I consistently use visuals now. Use decks. I swear by them. So I tend to roll into a pitch with two of these. One of these bad boys has my actual pitch on it. The document that I'm referring to as I'm talking. The other one has the visual presentation that I've built, and then that gets hooked up in such a way that it's projected onto the big screen, in the room, and it's really cool, right? Because again, you're convincing people that this world that's in your head and on paper exists, right? And they just got to say yes, and it'll exist, on television, right? So it's about bringing it, to life, and sometimes being able to visually, illustrate the journey of the pitch. Can be really fun and can help them really kind of sink into it. Then there's music. Let me say this about music. Music is like a hand grenade, right? It can work for you or it can blow you up. So do it if it works for you, right? Because technically it's a little more complicated because so I'm in a pitch. I tend to roll again my two computers, and I have a Bluetooth speaker that's on the table, and now I'm not just triggering my visuals, I'm also triggering music cues. So that can be a lot to do. Don't do it if it's going to mess you up, but if music can work and does work, it can be really cool. So I didn't actually use a speaker or use music to sell Washington Black. I used it on Prince of Cats, which you guys saw listed earlier. Prince of Cats is the movie Legendary that I wrote that Spike Lee is directing, and it is this sort of it's adapted from a graphic novel that is this sort of crazy mashup of Shakespeare, 80s hip hop, and Japanese samurai culture. And part of the element of how I sold it was this sort of texture in terms of the way hip hop was used, almost in this Shakespearean kind of Greek chorus sense. So I needed music to really help illustrate it. So for Prince of Cats, and when my producers will probably always say that this is where we sold it. I did this whole scene where we're playing music and the rhyme is jumping around the club, and people around him, but it's the internal kind of character voice. And anyway, music was a really key part of that. It's not a requirement, but if it helps you do it. And then I think the last thing to think about is practice and preparation, right? Because you can hear when somebody is prepared or not in a pitch, right? And of course you're yeah, but that goes without saying, of course I'll practice, but what are you practicing, right? What can you work on? And again, for me, it's not about memorizing, it's not about having things down rote, it's not about being robotic, it's about comfort. It's about doing it enough so it feels and sounds easy, right? So it does feel like that campfire. So you want to replicate your pitch conditions to some degree. You want to pitch to friends. You want to pitch to several people, not just yourself. Of course, you've got to do it aloud. You've got to hear what the rhythm of your voice is. If you've got a producer, you want to do run-throughs, with them. And it's about finding your routine, because your routine is what gives you, I think, what ultimately sells your pitch, which is confidence, right? So practice, preparation, routine equals confidence. And then you can get in that room, you can pitch it, you can pitch the hell out of it. And trust me, even if you don't sell it, which is, again, the most likely outcome, they are going to remember you. And that is the key, guys, for the kind of step-by-step organic success that you build in Hollywood. Is you just bust your ass, you do a good job, you stand out, people remember you, and even if it's 2 years later, they'll call you. All right? All right. Ray, you want to jump on some questions?
Yeah. Oh, I can make myself smaller. I like that better. So, if you guys have any questions, I already see some questions that people have already typed, but start typing more, and I'll answer them.
It's in the chat joint.
Yeah, so I had a question emailed to me, so I'm going to start off with that while you guys type and stuff. As you are an EP on Washington Black, what do you look for when staffing writers?
Oh well. Can you write your ass off? No. Obviously that goes without saying. But I think a lot of what let's. I know it's not something to take for granted, but let's take that as a given, right? That I am only going to respond to a kick-ass sample. Specifically with me, I guess, and specifically for that show, um, I'm going to respond to a sample that Washed in Black is a show that has a very surrealist vibe, that feels a certain way. So I'm good, whether it's that show or another one, I'm going to respond to writing that feels as if it's articulated in the direction of the show. But I think for me, of maybe more importance is going to be in the conversation, right? It's going to be when I interview a writer, and this is a whole new world we're all in because now we're doing it via Zoom, right? So writers room via Zoom. But I think for those of you staffing, my show, another show, what have you, ultimately the ability to be able to organically find your place amongst a group of writers in a room. There's a joke that we say, like, just don't be an axe murderer. I mean, yeah, the bar is slightly higher than that, but it's not an easy skill. Like, some people, not everybody can like sit with some other folks for all day, several weeks, several months, and have that be a good undertaking. So your ability to be able to succeed in that kind of group collective, whether it's my show or someone else's show, I think ultimately is going to be your biggest success defining factor.
Great question. And just to say this, please don't ask if he'll read your stuff. Please don't pitch anything. I say this all the time, but that's not what this is here for. We're here to learn, not to pitch our things. But that being said, there actually is a cool feature on this chat where they can just ask you questions audio verbally. So if you guys have a verbal question, you can do that. I'll allow that. So there's a button that says speak. So just click that speak button if you just want to ask your question instead of typing it out, and I'll accept people. So I'm going to accept Zoe. So Zoe, I've accepted you.
Oh, I see. Speak. Cool.
How does this work? I don't know. I've never done this before. So, Zoe, I accepted you? Are you there? I guess Zoe is not there. So I don't know how this is working. So I'll just go back to reading while we figure that out. What advice would you give to newbies to break into the industry and receive opportunities to pitch or work in a writer's room?
Ooh. So this is the how do I break in question?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, Ray, please stop me if I go too long because literally this is the whole thing, right? You always get this question, right? Look, point number one is every writer. I don't think there's any two writers you can talk to who can say they've had the same journey, right? We all break in differently, but the one thing that's a commonality for all of us who have broken in is there comes a point when you write that one thing, right? Because for a long time it can feel as if all you're hearing is no, right? And that's when you get that sense of well, Hollywood's trying to keep me out, right? But there is a point for everyone when you write that one thing, that for some reason everybody loves, right? And it spreads and people pass it along. Like when you write some really dope shit, people are happy to be like, look what I discovered, look what I found. So your quest is twofold. On the art and craft side, it is working to develop and write that one thing, like that good thing. And that good thing is not your first script. It's not your second script. It's not your third script. It's not your fourth script. It's probably not your 10th script. Do you get what I'm going on this? Like, you're probably not ready yet. Keep writing, okay? Like, and don't blow those early chances because so on the other side, you're also trying to expand your network to build contacts. Look, we've all done this. I did it, but I'm gonna tell you right now, don't do it. But we've all done it, right? We all had that chance somehow where we had access to someone who was in the game at a high level, and you just had to be like, "Can you read my joint?" Right? And they're nice and they read it, but you really weren't ready, and it really doesn't do anything for you. For you. I did it, with a showrunner 12 years ago when I really had no business doing it because he was a friend. So work on you're working on your craft first and foremost, and you're also working. Hopefully, you live in LA or you're doing stuff like this to slowly build your network of peers and contacts. And then this is how those two things come together. When you have the script that's ready, you have the network that you've built. That's your 1+1 that, God willing, will get you to 2. So I know we can do a lot more on that, but hopefully that's enough to kind of hang your hat on.
Great answer, and I want to emphasize that your first script is probably not that good. I get so many people that's like, "Oh, I just finished my script. I'm ready to sell it." And I'm like, I was that person too. Like, I thought the first thing I wrote, "Oh, this is about to blow up," but it's probably, just think about it.
Yeah,
the first
no,
time
we all were.
It's probably not going to be that good. So, like, I just keep it real in all these webinars, So, and that's okay. I would say get feedback and practice so it can be better. I think this is a good specific question. Lisa asked, if you already have a producer who wants to sell your IP and consider you a creator, but attach a border. So she already has...
She already has a who?
A producer that wants to sell her IP and consider her as a creator, but also attach a more experienced showrunner to the project. Is it likely that she'll still be part of the pitch?
Yeah. You do have to keep your expectations in line, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the leverage that you have, right? I have dealt with, as I said, we do a lot of adaptations, right? And there are some authors who want to be you, right? Who really want to be like, well, I want to be writing, the thing. And most of the time, that's not what you're going to be able to negotiate. You're going to be able to negotiate something that feels like, consulting, producer role. I mean, ultimately, it's a little bit tricky because your producer can make a lot of representations, here, but where it's really going to matter in terms of carving out how you're going to participate on the project is when you guys are successful in terms of making your approach to a studio and they have to buy the IP, right? Because you as the IP holder, like, you got to sell that, right? Like, I'm assuming it's a book or whatever it is. So that is the inflection point where, but I don't know what that leverage is, right? That leverage is going to depend on how much they want this project, how successful you are in the pitch process. The point is, if you can make your producer an ally, but also outside of your producer, you need some kind of representation that is like squarely allied for you, like whether that be a lawyer who's just going to do this one transactionally. I'm not sure if you're in a position where you are represented or not, although that's a whole thing now, but at least if you've got like a manager, on your side, but your goal sort of beyond what you guys have to do creatively to shape your pitch, strategically to put an experienced writer on it, then set it up, then take it out for meetings. Your goal is to get through all those steps successfully so that you are negotiating for a studio so that you can carve out your participation on this project. Because if you don't, you can be, unceremoniously cast to the wayside. You'll still make what you make as an IP holder, but I get that you want to participate in the, movement of your project to the television side, and that's going to happen in the ways that I laid out. Okay?
Okay.
Good question.
So Julia asked, what is the role of the agent when you're pitching?
When you're pitching?
I guess, I don't know. What is the agent doing in this for the writer in situations?
I mean, God, there's a lot of caveats here. First off, I don't work with agents right now. For those who don't know,
the WGA is having a dispute with agents, so now is not the time to get an agent right
now. There are some agencies, especially the smaller ones, who have signed what we call the code of conduct, who are allowed to work with writer clients. But there are quite a few writers, especially people who are experienced, who are doing fine without agents. So at least for right now, that's sort of where I am. But in terms of what your rep would do, call it agent, call it manager, they're usually involved in all the conversations that are leading up to your pitch, right? So strategically, in terms of the conversations with the producer, along with yourself, who you're going to take this to, kind of setting up those, those meetings, kind of drawing up those target charts, if you will. Then you go and you have your pitch, you do your thing. That representative is usually the first phone call. That's who gets the first phone call. It could be the producer too. It just depends, right? But let's just say on your behalf as the writer, your representative is going to get that call from the studio saying, yeah, we're going to pass, but it was great. We loved her, want to see her next thing. Or if you're so lucky, we want to buy it. And then, of course, they're involved after that in the actual negotiating and the pulling together of your deal. But they're not in the pitch. Like, that's what the question sounded like at first, but they're not sort of in your pitch. So before your pitch, after your pitch.
Okay. So Naomi asks, how do you determine who's like in the room that's actually pitching the story? If there's a bunch of people involved in the project, who gets to pitch it?
A bunch of people?
Well, I guess if there's because in your story you said, you were there, Hemingway was
right,
there, Kelly K. Brown,
okay, so the person that is doing the heavy lifting of the pitch itself is the writer, right? And that's, in any circumstance that is going to be you, or if you're part of a writing team, you and somebody else. Like, I can't imagine any circumstance where, there's definitely not a case of like, we got 5 writers up in here. And we're, So it's you alone, solo writer, or you and your writing team. And your producers, sure, play a role in the pitch, but that's usually, we tend to script out how the meeting works, before we go in. So your producer would usually, kind of set the table, right? So basically, what you did today, Ray, right? Your producer, you go in there, it's bad jokes, ha 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 ha, some small talk for like kicking shit for a few minutes. And then your exec or whoever, is doing will welcome you guys. I'm glad you came today. Can't wait to hear this thing. Bullshit, or whatever it is. And then your producer will then respond in turn and sort of set the table. Sometimes that's talking about doing a version of what I just did and talking about how Washington Black kind of came together. So like that's what we did, kind of reiterating how they found this book, how it was so exciting, how they put the team together. So again, just sort of bringing everyone here and then get to the point where they then say, okay, now that you've heard all that, now we turn it over to the writer to tell you why we're here today. And then the pitch, the actual formal part of the pitch begins. So hopefully that clears that up.
Okay. Marlon asks, as a creator, is it possible to retain some or all of the IP rights if a studio agrees to buy your idea?
No, once a studio buys it, it's bought.
Yeah.
It's bought. So, yeah. That's just like it's just theirs. Now look, you can negotiate whatever you can negotiate, right? It's not that they look, there's there's tails on deals. There's you have it for this sort of like rights articulation in this way. It's not, maybe that was too simplistic an answer. It's not like, all right, like get away, like this, whatever it is. But you've sold your thing, right? And and how that plays out in terms of other ways you may want to use it is ultimately going to be in the negotiation that that you make. But if you don't want to be in that game, then you don't participate in it.
Yeah. I've seen like several versions of sort of the same question, so I'm just gonna answer it. Basically, people are asking like, essentially, how do I get to pitch something? As we said, like it's very difficult.
Did they miss the top of it?
It's very difficult. So
I'll do it again.
No, I think I'll just say it quickly. There are three ways. I think it was in the slideshow, but we kind of glazed over it. Like, first of all, if you are someone that's a complete industry outsider, you don't work on a show, you don't know anyone, it is impossible to sell a script if you don't have any connections at all. So you may think, how can I get some connections? One, you can work your way up. You can get an entry-level job. You can be a PA. Then you can be a writer's assistant. You can get staffed on a show. You can work your way up, and eventually you're at an level and you have your own show. A lot of writers I know, like my boss, my showrunner now, that's how she worked her way up, and eventually she's a showrunner. So that's one thing you can do. B, you can create your own content. Be independent, and then you'll get attention from people, and then you can sell a show. Like, that's people like Issa Rae, who had Awkward Black Girl, Broad City. That was also a web series. A lot of people don't know that. Like, what's that one show about the weed delivery? High something? High? I don't know. But it was like
I forgot the name. You're talking about it.
It was a web series. HBO bought it. So I think there's podcasts like Homecoming. That was one of my favorite shows. Homecoming was a podcast. They turned it into a TV.
Podcasts are big.
So I always encourage people to make your own content, build an audience, and you can leverage that to sell it. So do it yourself. Don't wait for other people. That's also an option. And there. So.
All right.
High maintenance. That's what it's called.
Good answer, Ray. Good answer, Ray.
So, someone asked, why you mentioned that you don't think that newer writers should pitch limited series. Is there a specific reason for that, or no?
Well, only that actually is probably most writers. Studios and networks tend not to buy limited series. Like that's a generality. I mean, I'm literally about to do a limited series, so it's not literally, true. But a limited series for a network or studio ultimately tends to be more sort of a Emmy awards kind of play, right? Because it's only really in multi-season shows that it makes purely economic sense, right? So limited series, in a lot of ways, you can think of them as loss leaders, right? That they do it, like think of Chernobyl, right? That was an HBO a year ago, or the one that Showtime did about the cats who broke out of prison, or anyone like those. They tend to be specifically like, we've got this really great idea, this really great show that we think feels like a prestige play. So that's probably not the arena that most new writers are going to find themselves tapped in. You know what I mean? So it's a kind of like spend your energy wisely kind of question.
Exactly. So Kendall has a question. So basically, they noticed that we're in a wave of shows like Blackish, Insecure, where we see successful, upscale, educated toward sort of Black people. And they say, while that is a reality, from their perspective, it seems to be the only thing presented. Like, we don't have shows like Good Times or that sort of lower socioeconomic show anymore. So, as an upper level writer, do you feel that there is a aversion in television to showing Black people as lower middle class?
No, no, I wouldn't say. Look, that gets us into the complicated terrain of what Black shows are going or not going. But no, I would say, look, the first challenge is hopefully why we're all here today, in that, all the stuff that I'm talking about, like how difficult it is and how hard it is, like multiply all that shit by 10, 20, 50, right, for a Black writer, right? Like the challenges that I'm talking about are just period. You know what I mean? How difficult it is to be able to get to the point where you can sell a show, right? Regardless, the difficulties of then actually selling a show, right? So it's a thin needle to thread anyway. It becomes an even thinner needle to thread when you're talking about folks like like us. I think part of the challenge that you may be seeing on the screens is just reflective in the fact of how many of us there are, in those rooms making those pitches. I can't speak for all the other writers. I don't know what those guys are pitching. I don't know what's being passed on, because that's the other thing too. Like, you're seeing things that have matriculated in in success, but behind all those shows that you're seeing, there's a bunch of other stuff that is being pitched, that is being bought, that just necessarily didn't make its way to to air. So I know of shows personally from friends of mine that I think land in the zone that you're that you're talking about. But if there's less of us doing a thing, you're going to see that that differentiation, the way it manifests on air. So hopefully we're all part of the change wave that's going to change that. We are, I think, collectively got to be committed to a wider range, a wider scope, a broadening of what we are and how we're represented on on the screen. Regard to class, to however you want to split it up, right? There just needs to be more of it, and I think we're slowly getting there. And I think the state of the world right now hopefully will ignite that fire to get us there a little faster. Definitely some of this. Definitely stuff. I was gonna say, like, I'm gonna have a movie coming out next year with Black hip hop dudes in Brooklyn, like quoting Shakespeare and swinging samurai swords. So you ain't never think that.
Yeah, there's shows like someone mentioned The Chi, Atlanta, the show on the Law. I think there are shows that do show lower class Black people as well. So during the pitch, do you touch on budget or marketing, or is that something that just comes after?
Not during your presentation, of the show. Sometimes that may come up organically in a meeting, that our network is like really excited about. Budget's a little more specificity. Budget is kind of further down the line, because budget kind of, you can talk about it from a very macro sense, right? Like from well, that sounds like a pretty pricey show, right? What does those numbers mean? But budget doesn't mean anything until you got an actual script, right, that you can look at. Until you got a series Bible, that you can look at. Until you got a sense of what this thing is doing in terms of locations, in terms of cast, that begins to put more meat, on really getting a number. But from the beginning, it's really about those macro conversations. You can pitch a show and people can be like, yeah, that's a pricey show. That's not. So budget may come up in that context, but not with any sort of great specificity in the beginning. But it's not part of your job in the context of your pitch to be able to like, yeah, this is $5 million episode. That's not what you're doing. Yeah.
So Yahira. I don't know. I probably messed up your name. Sorry, but they have a question. I don't know if you can answer this question, but I thought I'd throw it out there. But they are pitching a children's TV show. was a teacher and has lots of knowledge about childhood development, but she was asking, do you have any specific advice for pitching for kids TV? I know you don't do that. I don't know you're the right person to ask, but
that's not what I do. But look, I would say, and again, I think it's less children's TV than, you know, are you pitching, like what kind of show are you pitching? You know, if you're pitching the pitch that I laid out for me, like I pitch and I work in 1 hour drama, right? So think of what I did as articulated towards that. But still, some of those macro things that I talked about, I think are applicable regardless of what you're pitching, right? Especially like the last part that we talked about in terms of technique, you know, and all those kind of details. I think that all applies there. And, you know, I'd be surprised if even the things that I talked about in terms of the silos that compose a pitch, I'd be surprised if even, you know, a children's show wouldn't have those. You just may have stuff that I'm not aware of, right? But, you know, I'd be shocked if in the course of that pitch you don't need to talk about, you know, your overall vision of the show, you know, why you're the right person to do it, the characters, the story journey across the pilot in the first season. Like, that kind of stuff I think feels evergreen, you know, no matter what kind of television you're doing. But you just may have stuff that I don't know about because I don't work in TV.
Exactly. Thank you. Your friend Ian says you skipped over the story of how and why your pitch had gone badly once, but it might be helpful to hear and what you did in that case if you're open to sharing.
The story of pitch went badly. Did I say that? I can't remember which one it is. I think I've only had one pitch that I thought went badly. You know, whatever people, I guess there are lessons to draw from it. Then I was a very young writer, career-wise, not age. I'm a grown-ass man for a long time. But I was, like young writers tend to get, you know, you get asked to, you know, come by XYZ, you know, producer, because they want to hear your take, right, on a particular thing. And and again, this is one of those cases where, you know, it's take sort of means the same thing as pitch, but, you know, sort of synonymous. And this is for feature, so it was a little bit different anyway. But it was, you know, fairly well-known producer, and it was a fairly well-known, you know, IP. And I'm a big kind of, you know, spies and military fiction, you know, fan as well. So this was sort of in that world. And it was just a trip, man. I started pitching, and like literally, it was like we were like in a fight from like the moment I started, right? And like I would say something, and he would just be like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense," you know. Something like literally like this really kind of like aggressive like posture, right? And this has just never happened to me before, right? So I keep pitching, and he'd be like, "No, but that doesn't, like, why would you do that?" Like, and then finally, like, it just became like just some man, human, personal shit. I just stopped, and I was like, "Look, like maybe I'm just not the person. Maybe this is just not the pitch for you. But I'm just not gonna sit here and go through this. So I'm sorry if I wasted your time." Yada yada yada. And I got up to leave, and it actually, we didn't end up kind of working together. So it's not like it was trying to be a big happy ending, but I think it was important for me to do that because he kind of caught himself, and he apologized, and he was like, you know, I forgot how he explained what it was, but I was like, even so, I think I'm out. You know, so is there a lesson in that of some kind? I'm sure, you know, there's lessons about where the lines are and sort of, you know, how you do or don't step over them. And I think, look, there's also a lesson there too about you know, about not being afraid, right? Either, because there is a point where you like, I worked so hard, and I'm in these rooms, I'm in a studio a lot, I'm on this, you know, I'm on this thing, I'm talking to these people, like, you know, I'm just gonna take whatever it is, you know, I don't want to mess up, because you hear, yeah, Hollywood is this like small town, and you know, whatever. But I think as long as you are standing firmly in your own rights, your own whatever, you're fine. So yes, I basically told dude go fuck himself, but nicely. And my career did not suffer. So.
Be true to yourself. Lesson in that. Great.
There you go, Ray. There you go. That's lesson.
Kilo Martin asks, do you know of any specific studios that are more open to Black writers or creators?
No, that's not really a thing. God, I don't think so. Right? I mean,
Jordan.
God, it's so like.
That's a production company. Production company.
Production companies, like that's the layer I think where you might want to talk about, but no, like not on the studio network level.
Yeah, so for some people, they might not know the difference. There are production companies, and then there are studios and networks. So there are production companies that they like to make specific content.
Specific. They do a certain thing.
Yeah, so you can totally find production companies that are open to making Black content or Latin content or LGBT content, whatever the content. There are production companies that specifically do that, but on like a larger studio network level, that's not really a thing. They just want to find money, pretty much.
Well, they just want to make some money. That's what they want to make money.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Green shit, brown shit, black shit, pink shit. They want to make some money. So
exactly. Oh, okay. Stuart asks, how did your experience as a journalist help your film and TV writing? Good
question. Somebody did some research. It has helped me tremendously. God, in so many ways. Again, I'll try to do some quickly. It has helped in terms of the way I think of a character, right? Like I spent so many years as a journalist, and I worked in the music field, right, in hip hop field, right. So I spent years running behind, the biggies of the world, the Tupacs, all these sort of outlandish, sort of larger than life people, right? Like my very first article I wrote for The Source was on Wu-Tang Clan, and it went from me supposedly just meeting them for an afternoon interview at a photo shoot to me basically being kidnapped and being on the road for a week with the Wu-Tang Clan. One day that'll be
that sounds like a movie. Yeah.
But but journalism and interviewing real people, and sort of dealing with them, is just immensely valuable in terms of when I'm constructing, characters and people in this world. It's real good. It's been real good in terms of juggling. So juggling is a thing that hopefully you guys will all experience as you get more successful. Frankly, you can practice it to some degree now, because to succeed as a writer, you're gonna have to learn how to juggle. You're gonna have to learn how to juggle projects, and it means exactly what it sounds like. Like we're always working on 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever things, at a time. Things are at different stages. Things are at different points. But it's very difficult in this day and time to sort of say, well, I'm just working on this one thing. Some people do, who are at an even more kind of elevated space than than I am, right? But that ability to keep balls in the air comes from journalism for me, right? Working under pressure and working under deadline, journalism was a great place to develop that. And and I guess just lastly, just being a journalist, which I was from right out of college until well into my 30s, just trains you, I think, to look at the world and look at the forces and people and events and incidents moving across the world. It helped make me a broad thinker in localized national geopolitical sense, and all of that's been extremely valuable to think about as a screenwriter.
Very good question. And I also want to alert everyone to we have people asking about making their own content. Next week, we're doing a webinar about making your own content. Would you look at that? We have Janine Daniels, who co-founded Black and Sexy TV, and an online, distribution platform, and she was able to leverage that into selling her own. She sold a pilot to HBO. She's staffed on Snowfall and was on Love Is. So she will outline specifically how you can create your own content and use that as leverage to sell work or get staffed on a show. So check that out, because that's what we're not going to talk about that here. But anyway, thank you so much. A lot of people asking about copywriting questions. Just copyright it. If you want, you can. If that makes you feel good, you can go on the US whatever copyright.com. What it is, but Google copyright. It's only like $35, I think.
Yeah.
You can register with the WGA if you want, but
you're okay. You're okay, guys.
Yeah, I feel like that's also, I do want to go over that too, because these are like the top 5 questions that people ask when they are very new, like amateurs, and I'm not saying that in like an offensive way. I did the exact same thing. Number 1, you're always worried about someone's gonna steal your shit, so I gotta copyright my shit. No one's gonna steal your shit, and 95% of the time, no one's gonna steal it. But like copyrighted, I'm all for that. Like making yourself, if that calms your mind, copyright it. It's not that much money, do it. And then B, like asking random people to read your script. Like no one's gonna read your script. You can't DM Shonda Rhimes. You can't do this. And I say this because like I work for Lena and I see all the messages she gets. These people are not going to read your script. They legally can't. So it's just a waste of your time. There.
Focus on getting better, guys.
PSA, just focus on writing. I feel like most people, when you're in that stage, it's like to be rude, but